The drone glided beneath the surface, its powerful lights piercing the blue depths of Jacob's Well. The first 30 feet were stunning, but this was no casual exploration. The machine was venturing into forbidden territory, a place where no fewer than 12 people have disappeared without a trace. Scientists monitored the feed on a screen as the drone moved deeper into the narrow, winding passages that divers refer to as the trap. Their mission was to chart the cave system. What the drone's camera revealed, however, was something else altogether. A chilling discovery that cemented the well's dark and gruesome reputation, the Well of Whispers. Nestled in the sun-scorched, rolling terrain of Texas Hill Country sits a modest little town called Wimberley. Just beyond its outskirts, Cypress Creek winds its way through the land. In the limestone bed of that creek lies a hole, a dark and perfectly circular opening roughly 12 feet wide, sitting in what is otherwise shallow, calm water. This is Jacob's Well. On a blazing Texas afternoon, this spot buzzes with life. Families, college students, and tourists line up eagerly. One by one, they launch themselves off the surrounding limestone ledges, hollering with delight as they plunge into the impossibly clear and endlessly cool water. Fed by a natural spring, the well maintains a steady temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the entire year. It looks like pure happiness, a genuine Texas oasis. But this whole scene is a beautiful and dangerous illusion. The well is a trap. What most of these jubilant jumpers never realize is that they are diving headfirst into the mouth of a massive, lethal, and extraordinarily complex underwater cave system. Jacob's Well is not a well in any conventional sense. It is a karstic spring, the entrance to a vertical cave that drops straight down into the dark, reaching deep into the Trinity Aquifer. For swimmers, the adventure ends at the floor of the first room, a sunlit chamber sitting about 30 feet below the surface. For scuba divers, though, that chamber is merely the doorstep. Jacob's Well holds legendary status in the cave diving community, but for entirely the wrong reasons. It has earned a reputation as a diver's grave. What no one warns you about is that the well functions like a flawless natural trap. The system consists of at least 4 known chambers, each one darker and more treacherous than the one before it. These chambers are linked by narrow, spiraling passageways, with names that read like ominous warnings. To travel from the second chamber into the third, divers must squeeze through a passage so constricted it has been named the birth canal. Deeper in, other features bear names, like the coffin and the final squeeze. The well deceives in the cruelest way. Its crystal clear water, which appears so inviting and safe, is actually its deadliest weapon. The floors of these deep chambers are not bare, solid rock. Instead, they are blanketed with a thick, powdery layer of fine limestone silt. A single careless move, one poorly placed fin kick, can instantly transform that clear water into a dense, milky white cloud. Divers call this a silt out. In that sudden and total darkness, a diver can lose all sense of direction within seconds. They cannot see their own hand in front of their face. They cannot read their depth gauge, check their compass, or locate their dive partner. Most critically, they cannot find the safety guideline that leads back up to the surface, assuming they even laid one. Panic takes hold. A panicking diver breathes more rapidly, burning through their limited air supply at a frightening pace. They become lost. They exhaust their air, and the well claims yet another victim. Over the decades, at least 12 individuals have perished in these lightless passages. Their remains are frequently lodged so deep or within tunnels so unstable that any recovery attempt is considered impossible. The well becomes their final resting place. To say the least, this location draws both tragedy and mystery in equal measure. The lure of its forbidden depths is so overwhelming that divers, particularly young and daring ones, simply cannot resist. Each wants to be the person who unlocks its secrets, who ventures deeper than any before them. This recurring cycle of loss grew so severe that local authorities, desperate to prevent further deaths, attempted to seal the well permanently. They welded a heavy steel grate, a grid of thick rebar, directly over the entrance to the deeper chambers. They believed this would bring the story to a close. They were mistaken. The pull of the well, its quiet promise of hidden secrets, proved far too powerful. Driven by curiosity and a sense of adventure, divers would show up under cover of darkness, armed with heavy-duty bolt cutters. Time and again, they would force the entrance open to reach the forbidden passages lurking below. The well simply would not stay sealed. That's when science had to step in. You see, this well isn't merely a hazardous hole in the ground. It serves as a critical geological feature. It's the primary feeding source for Cypress Creek. It functions as a direct, open window into the condition of the Trinity Aquifer, an enormous underground reservoir that supplies drinking water to millions of people. Scientists needed answers about what was actually going on inside. How had these passages been carved out? How far down did the whole thing truly extend? And what exactly lurked in those depths that made it so distinctively deadly? But after so much heartbreak and loss, sending another human being down there was simply off the table. The danger was far too great. So the researchers turned to technology instead. Their solution was to send in a machine. The plan called for deploying an advanced remotely operated vehicle, an underwater drone, to venture where no human could safely come back from. This device would be the very first to explore and chart the deepest, most dreaded sections of the well. The assembled team of geologists and scientists was buzzing with excitement. They believed they were on the verge of producing the first complete map of this extraordinary natural wonder. They had absolutely no idea they were about to find themselves as witnesses to a chilling, cold case stretching back decades. What they uncovered wasn't merely rock formations, it was a tomb, the camera's horrifying discovery. On a calm and sun-drenched morning, a group of researchers and geologists gathered along the rim of Jacob's Well. The mood was heavy with tension. This was no casual, recreational dive. A white van sat parked nearby, humming quietly with the hum of electronics. Its side doors swung open to expose a row of high-definition monitors. That van was the command center. The centerpiece of the whole operation was a compact, vivid yellow machine called Explorer. This was no hobbyist toy. It was a sophisticated, industrial-grade ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, engineered to handle crushing underwater pressures. It came fitted with multiple 4K cameras, powerful forward-facing lights, and state-of-the-art sonar capable of mapping tunnel walls in absolute darkness. A thick fiber optic tether cable ran from the drone all the way back to the van, ready to deliver a crystal-clear live feed to the operators on the monitors. The mission itself was straightforward. Send the drone in, descend all the way down to the fourth chamber, and use the sonar system to construct the first ever three-dimensional map of this seemingly impossible cave. A technician carefully lowered Explorer into the 12-foot wide opening of the well. On the monitors, the team watched as the screen filled completely with blue. The drone's thrusters hummed to life and the descent got underway. The first chamber was genuinely stunning. The drone dropped 30 feet, and the Texas sunlight shimmered and danced across the rock walls, bathing the entire space in warm light. Everything looked promising. The operator, his hands calm and steady on the controls, angled the drone forward and guided it down a sloping passage. This was the gateway into the second chamber. The image on screen shifted from vivid blue to a heavy, deep indigo. At 80 feet below the surface, all natural sunlight had completely vanished. The drone's powerful lights switched on, slicing a sharp white cone of brightness into the pure underground blackness. The surrounding walls were smooth, pale limestone, shaped across thousands of years by constantly moving water. Then the drone reached the first major challenge, just the birth canal. This was the famously tight squeeze that led into the third chamber. Sonar readings confirmed the passage was extremely narrow, barely enough room for the drone to fit through. What most people failed to notice was the floor. It was blanketed in loose, deep gravel. The operator had to exercise extraordinary caution. He dialed back the thrusters, easing the ROV through with precision, doing everything possible to avoid stirring up that treacherous silt. Several tense minutes passed, and then the drone was through. It floated out into the third chamber, a wider, lightless void stretching around it. The space felt like a waiting room, utterly silent and completely still. The team paused briefly to run through the drone's systems. Everything checked out fine. Now came the moment they had all been waiting for. The operator directed the drone toward a small, shadowy crack in the rock at the far end of the chamber. This was it, the entrance to the fourth chamber, the point of no return. The drone nosed its way into the narrow tunnel. The walls closed in around it immediately. No human had set eyes on this place in decades. The passage was cramped. The ground beneath was an unstable layer of rocks and silt. As the drone pressed deeper, its light suddenly bounced off something unexpected. Something that was definitely not rock. The operator brought the ROV to a halt. A glint of metal had caught his eye. He worked the controls to zoom the camera closer. Everyone inside the van fell completely silent. On the monitor, there was no mistaking it. A scuba fin jutting upward from a mound of gravel. A cold wave of dread washed through the van. The operator slowly swept the camera around. Just a few feet away sat another object. An old, corroded oxygen tank, half swallowed by the silt. Its regulator was thick with crust. Then came a torn fragment of a black wetsuit snagged on a jagged rock, and then they saw it. The footage that came through was like a blow to the stomach. Wedged into a crevice, partly pinned beneath shifting gravel, were the skeletal remains of a human being. The scientists were shaken to their core. This was no longer a geological survey. It had quietly transformed into a recovery mission carried out entirely by a machine. The drone lingered near the remains, its lights casting a pale glow over the silent underwater tomb. The diver's equipment was unmistakably from a much earlier time. On the torn remnants of the wetsuit, a small and faded name tag was barely legible. The operator repositioned the camera, working hard to capture a clean image. With some digital enhancement done from inside the van, the letters gradually came into focus. The name read, Kent Min. That name hit the team like a shockwave. This wasn't simply a diver who had gone missing. Kent Min was a legend. His story was among the most well-known and heartbreaking events in the entire history of the well. He had disappeared in this very spot decades earlier, back in 1979. For all those years, his friends, his family, and the wider diving community had been left wondering about his final moments. Now, a robot was staring directly at the answer. The discovery was terrifying, not because of the body itself, but because of what it revealed. The footage made clear exactly how he had been trapped. The passage was impossibly narrow, and the entire floor consisted of a deep, shifting bed of loose gravel. Kent hadn't simply gotten wedged in place. It appeared as though the cave itself had buried him alive. The gravel, prone to sliding and shifting at the slightest disturbance, had come cascading down and pinned him where he lay. But the drone turned up something else, something that made the whole discovery even more unsettling. As the ROV swept its camera across the small dark space, the lights fell upon another set of scuba tanks and another fin. Kent Maupin had not gone down there alone. The team inside the van came to a horrifying realization. The drone was hovering inside a mass grave, a place that held the untold secrets of multiple lost explorers. The footage was chilling in every sense. It laid bare just how merciless this place truly was. The final squeeze wasn't merely a tight stretch of passage. It was an active and deadly trap built from unstable, ever-shifting rock. This footage marked the first time anyone had ever witnessed the true nature of the fourth chamber. Before this moment, it had existed only in stories, in diagrams sketched by the handful of people who had made it back out. Now they had high-definition proof staring back at them. The well was not simply a maze, it was a predator. Who was Kent Maupin, and what drove him down there in the first place? To understand what that drone uncovered, you have to travel back in time, back to September 9th, 1979. The world was a very different place. The culture surrounding cave diving was, to put it simply, the Wild West. It was a brand new frontier populated by brave, almost reckless men and women. They were fueled by an overwhelming drive to go deeper than anyone before them, to be the first, and to lay eyes on things no one else had ever seen, and Jacob's Well stood as one of their greatest prizes. Kent Maupin was exactly that kind of person. He was young, he was a seasoned diver, and by every account, he was absolutely fearless. He had become obsessed with Jacob's Well, having dived it on numerous occasions, yet like so many others before him, he remained utterly captivated by the legend of the fourth chamber. It was the final frontier of the well, a place many had attempted to reach, but very few had ever actually glimpsed. On that fateful evening, Kent and his companion Mark Brasher made up their minds that they would be the ones to conquer it. Mark was a college student at Saninto College, eager, adventurous, and deeply admiring of the more experienced Kent, and the two of them were not alone. They were among a larger gathering of 8 divers from Pasadena who had set up camp close to the well. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, that particular kind of jittery energy that builds before something dangerous and significant. As night crept in, Kent, Mark, and several others suited up. They understood what they were getting into. The well had already swallowed lives before, but the mysterious pull from the depths, that irresistible siren's call, outweighed any fear they carried. Their objective was straightforward: make it to the 4th chamber. What most people failed to notice, though, was how they had prepared, or rather, how poorly they had done so. No spare lights were brought along. They carried no safety ropes. They ran no guideline into the cave, which is the single most critical piece of equipment a diver can have, the thing that leads you back to safety. Their approach, it appears, was simply to swim in, fueled by raw confidence and a belief they could navigate their way out again. That belief would prove deadly. Another member of their group, a diver named Joe, was in the water alongside them. He watched Kent and Mark go under. He trailed them down through the 1st chamber and into the 2nd. He observed as they squeezed themselves through the birth canal and moved into the 3rd chamber. That's when everything shifted. Joe looked on, bewildered, as Kent and Mark made their way toward the small dark opening at the far side of the room, the entry point to the 4th chamber. This was the threshold. Joe saw the 2 men pause. Then, with creeping dread, he watched as Kent and Mark started pushing their bulky steel air tanks ahead of them, forcing their bodies into the tight, lightless passage. Nobody had told Joe the plan extended this far. Kent vanished into the darkness. Mark came right behind him and disappeared too. Joe, gripped by sudden, overwhelming panic, held himself at the entrance. He swept his dive light back and forth in frantic arcs, desperate to catch Mark's attention, but Mark never turned around. He just kept forcing himself deeper into the opening. Joe knew without any doubt that something was horribly, horribly wrong. He glanced at his air gauge. It was reading dangerously low. He was at a depth that left no room for error. A decision had to be made. He slammed his diving knife hard against his own tank. The sharp clang, clang, clang rang out through the water. Every diver knows that sound as the universal signal for danger or pay attention. Nothing came back, only silence from within the passage. Running out of hope, his air dropping to critical levels, Joe held his light aimed into the tunnel. It was a fading, desperate beacon, a silent plea that Kent and Mark would spot it and follow it to safety. Eventually, his own survival left him no other option but to turn back. As Joe made his way upward, something strange unfolded around him. The previously crystal-clear water suddenly became murky. Visibility fell to nothing. A silt out had occurred. Somewhere deep inside the cave, the 2 divers, whether in panic or by pure accident, had disturbed the floor below them. Or, as drone footage would later confirm, the unstable gravel bed had shifted on its own, agitated by their movement through it. When Joe broke through the surface of the well, his breathing was ragged and heavy. He looked around. He was completely alone. His heart sank. He cried out for help, knowing somewhere deep inside that Kent and Mark were gone. The well had claimed them. The stillness of the night was torn apart by the wail of sirens. A police officer arrived and placed a call to a man named Don Dibble. Dibble ran a local dive shop and was a highly skilled former Navy diver. He was widely regarded as the finest deep-water rescue diver in the entire state. Even though the odds of finding them alive were nearly non-existent, Don, his partner Paul Battaglia, and 2 other volunteers from their rescue team didn't think twice. They seized their gear and rushed to the scene. Upon arriving, they encountered the rest of the diving group, visibly shaken and worn out. One of them mentioned that he had briefly attempted to enter the passage and believed he had glimpsed something, what appeared to be bodies already partially buried beneath a fresh gravel slide inside the cave. Don Dibble, the experienced rescuer, stepped to the rim of the well. He stared down into the dark, wide-open mouth of the water below. It was the middle of the night, and that opening looked like a doorway into another world entirely. He made the difficult but professional decision. The darkness, the silt, and the danger were simply too great to send anyone in right away. They decided to wait until sunrise. The recovery team was geared up and ready to go. None of them had any clue they were walking straight into something nightmarish. The well had not yet finished taking lives. A burial ground hidden beneath the gravel. Come the following morning, a heavy sense of dread hung over Jacob's well. The recovery team, under Don Dibble's command, was prepared to move. Everyone understood the dangers lurking below. The mission wasn't simply to locate Kent and Mark, it was to bring them back above ground. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the team showed up and the first divers descended. Each one carried a small garden trowel. When they reached the narrow corridor leading into the fourth chamber, they saw exactly what the drone camera would capture many decades later: a loose, unstable wall of shifting gravel. They got to work, attempting to clear a path by moving the gravel one tiny fistful at a time. But here's where things got brutal. Disturbing the gravel only made the situation far worse. The entire pile was dangerously unstable. Every rock they pulled away caused more to come tumbling down from above, filling in whatever space they'd just managed to clear. It was like trying to dig through dry sand, underwater, in pitch blackness. Don Dibble, listening to the frantic and contradictory reports coming back from his divers, made the kind of call that only a true leader can make. "I'm going in," he said. He was the expert. He wasn't about to send his team somewhere he wouldn't go himself. He suited up and brought along a game warden by the name of Calvin Turner for backup and safety. Together, they dropped down into the cold, crystal-clear water. They left spare air tanks at 25 feet and 75 feet. Standard protocol for any deep or technically demanding dive. They ran their safety lines. Deep inside the cave, right at the entrance to that deadly passage, Don Dibble stopped. He checked his air gauge. 1,100 pounds per square inch. Given the depth and the hard physical work ahead of him, he knew exactly what that reading meant. He had roughly 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes to locate the missing divers and make it back out. He gave the OK signal to Calvin, who stayed back at the entrance to keep watch. Don carefully pushed his head and shoulders into the tight opening. He gripped his safety line in one hand and his bright underwater torch in the other. Nothing was visible except a sloping wall of loose gravel. He pressed forward, trying to dig his way through. And then, in one heart-stopping second, the whole mass gave way. A rush of rock and silt came pouring down, burying him completely. The gravel slide pinned Don right at the entrance, trapping his arms and his entire body. The water that had been perfectly clear turned to zero visibility in an instant. He was caught in a total silt-out, stuck and surrounded by absolute terrifying darkness. He couldn't move. He couldn't knock on his tank to signal Calvin. He was buried alive underground. He struggled, and his breathing turned rapid and shallow, the sound of it bouncing around inside his mask. He was burning through his 10 minutes of air at a horrifying pace. He could feel the crushing press of gravel and water around him, and he could feel his air supply draining away. Consciousness was beginning to slip from him. In that moment, Don Dibble arrived at a calm and horrifying conclusion. He accepted that this was it. He was going to die here, in the same place as the men he had come to recover. He didn't want his last moments to be ones of panic. He decided to try and speed the end along. He thought about breathing in the silty water, but instead he chose to drink it. He opened his mouth and took several large gulps, felt himself growing heavy, and prepared to let go. Then something impossible happened. His body acted entirely on its own. A violent, involuntary convulsion, a last-ditch survival reflex, shook him from head to toe. That single movement freed him just enough. His mask had flooded with water, but when he gasped, he caught sight of a light. There, right in front of him, glowing through the darkness like an angel, was Calvin Turner. Calvin had spotted the silt cloud and pushed in, extending a spare regulator, an extra octopus airline, toward him. Don seized it, shoved it into his mouth, and pulled in a deep, life-saving breath. He was alive. But the nightmare had nowhere near finished with him. In his panicked state, and after swallowing all that water, Don had gulped down an enormous amount of air, which had collected in his stomach. As he and Calvin began rising toward the surface, the surrounding water pressure decreased. The trapped air inside his body started to expand, just like a weather balloon climbing to high altitude. He tried to release it, but his body simply wouldn't cooperate. The agony and pressure building in his abdomen became impossible to endure. He understood he was in a desperate race against time. If he ascended too gradually, the expanding gas could trigger an embolism, a condition that would kill him. He had to break the surface immediately. By the time he hauled himself out of the water, his stomach was distended as though he were, to put it gently, 9 months along. He tore the regulator from his mouth and let out a scream. The pain, he later recalled, was beyond any description. It went on for 12 brutal hours. He was rushed straight to Brooke Army Medical Center. Initially, the doctors believed he had the bends, otherwise known as decompression sickness. They placed him inside a recompression chamber. It made no difference. The pain persisted. Eventually, a different doctor ordered x-rays. What they found was a horrifying and almost unbelievable truth. The wall of his stomach had ruptured inside his own body. That injury had triggered peritonitis, a massive and potentially fatal infection. The surgeon who performed the operation later said it felt like cutting into a fully pressurized basketball. It was a 1 in a million kind of injury. The fact that he was still breathing was nothing short of a miracle. While Don Dibble lay in a hospital bed fighting to survive, the recovery operation pressed on. Another specialist, Don Broad, was brought into the situation. He dove the well and spotted the light that Kent Mopin had dropped, still faintly glowing in the darkness below. He could see the corridor of gravel clearly. He knew exactly what they were dealing with. He told the families directly. The only realistic way to retrieve them was to remove all that gravel from the top down. The families brought in a commercial outfit called Schaefer Diving Company. The crew arrived with a recompression chamber and a massive industrial suction hose. For days on end, they labored away, pulling tons of gravel up from 60 feet below and depositing it into the creek. But the task turned out to be impossible. Every time they cleared a foot of material, another foot would simply slide right back in. The well was replenishing itself. The money dried up. The work had become far too dangerous to continue. A final crew from another company, Brown and Root, was sent in to give one last assessment. Their conclusion was identical. The risk was simply too great. The well was an unstable, shifting grave that kept moving. 12 days after they vanished, the search for Kent Malin and Mark Brashear was officially called off. The most sensible course of action was to leave them undisturbed where they rested. The well was sealed once more, this time with a more permanent concrete lid and grate, intended to prevent anyone from ever attempting the same thing again. The deadly gravel bed, as it had come to be called, had claimed its victory. The well was shut, but the legends surrounding it were only just beginning to take shape. A portal hidden beneath the water. The drone footage captured during the Explorer mission accomplished something truly remarkable. It resolved the physical mystery of what had happened to Kent Min. It revealed to the entire world that the fourth chamber is a treacherous and unstable gravel trap. The scientists who reviewed the footage were deeply unsettled by that physical reality, but the footage couldn't account for everything. A great many people are fascinated by Jacob's well, and not solely because of its physical dangers. For centuries, this location has been steeped in mystery. It carries a certain feeling, a kind of energy, and the drone's silent, eerie journey through that underwater grave only added fuel to the wild theories that have circulated around this place for decades. What if the well is more than just a cave system? What if it's something else entirely? To begin with, there's the oldest legend of all, the bottomless pit. For more than 100 years, local people have claimed the well has no bottom whatsoever. They insisted it descended all the way to the center of the earth. The drone mission appeared to disprove this. It charted the chambers in detail, but here's the catch. The drone only mapped the passages that were already known. The system is structured like a honeycomb. What if the fourth chamber isn't the final point, but merely a filter? What if passages beyond it continue downward into an abyss that no living person has ever laid eyes on? Then there's the theory that the well itself is alive. This one has become among the most widely held. Though specific legends have faded over time, we know that Jacob's Well served as a sacred gathering site for Native American tribes. It was a wellspring of life. Many people today believe that this sacredness charges the place with a powerful and dangerous energy. They say the well has a voice, a low-frequency hum that you sometimes feel in your body more than you actually hear with your ears. They claim the well draws divers toward it. People who have made it out alive after coming dangerously close to the edge describe an eerie, almost hypnotic sensation, a draw to push just a little further, to discover what lies around the next corner. They say the silt-outs and gravel slides, like the one that swallowed Don Dibble, don't feel accidental. They feel deliberate, as though the well itself is guarding its secrets, actively ensnaring anyone who ventures too deep. This brings us to the next theory, the creature. What if it isn't a silt-out at all that triggers the panic? What if the shadows spotted beneath the surface, the very ones mentioned in that earliest drone report, are something more than just shadows? The Trinity Aquifer is a vast, ancient underground sea. It remains almost entirely uncharted. What if something actually inhabits that system? An undiscovered life form, some kind of Texas cave beast adapted to absolute darkness and immense pressure, a predator that treats the well as its own territory. It sounds far-fetched until you recall that goblin sharks and giant squids roam our deep oceans. Is it truly impossible that a large, unknown creature could be living inside a deep-water aquifer? Perhaps that's what the divers who disappeared actually encountered in their final moments. Beyond that, the theories grow even more outlandish. Some people have suggested the well is a vortex, or even an interdimensional gateway. This opens the door to an entire realm of the unexplained. These theorists argue the well sits on a high energy point, a location where the boundary between our world and another grows thin. Is Jacob's Well a cursed place or simply a natural wonder we've managed to destroy? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. And make sure to like and subscribe for more mysteries like this one.